What's up, folks? Granison Shines here. LPG, League of Prestigious Gentlemen. That is us. And we are embarking upon our video series. We'll be talking to gentlemen about gentleman type stuff centered around the ideas that we can have the wealth, the health, the relationships of a perfect gentleman. That's what we're all about here, understanding how to be that gentleman. Today, I have with me Mr. Stacy Shepard. We are going to be talking about communication as gentlemen, as guys. Sometimes communication is a little bit on the not so much side or the lackadaisical side. However, us being the leaders that we're supposed to be, and that's what we're all about over here, LPG, it's about being leaders. And guess what? Leaders, the number one skill set that leaders embark upon is communication. How do we communicate effectively, appropriately, in the right manner? So without further ado, Mr. Stacy Shepard, what's going on, man? How are you?
So good to be here. I've been looking forward to the conversation since you brought it up. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Good deal. Glad to hear that. Gentlemen, remember, we can be men, we can be masculine, we can be leaders, we can be lovers, we can be protectors, yet we can be peaceful, and we can be providers, and we can be passionate. That's our mantra here at LPG. So again, today we're going to talk about conversation, free flow conversation, and this conversation is just going to just open wide up, and you gentlemen will learn a lot from our conversation. However, on the flip side, I do have my cigar. I have some whiskey. Stacy, what you got over there?
You know, it's not a super fancy bourbon this go around, but I'm a bourbon guy, and
Love bourbon.
I got my little bourbon. This helps with my free flow conversation too, actually.
I bet it does. In fact, I got a little B&B here, a little Benedictine and brandy. Nice flavor, absolutely.
I've been in the exploration mode of bourbons lately. I do have my one or two favorites, but I've been really exploring a bunch and trying to find out what I really do and don't like, and that's been fun.
Good to hear it. I'm a bourbon guy too. Not so much a Scotch guy anymore, but definitely bourbon. Definitely.
Strangely, as much as I love bourbon, the best alcohol that has ever been on my lips was a Glenfiddich 21 year, and it was just absolutely unbelievable. Never had a taste it was like a butter that was going down my throat, and the taste crazy.
Butter going down your throat. Yeah, that's a good one. I like Glenfiddich 21 year. The Macallan 21 year is good as well. Even though I think I like to eat, but it's all good though. All good. Ready to have a conversation around communication?
Absolutely. Yep.
So, you know that we teach communication with Saduri International. I teach other gentlemen how to communicate in the relationship space. We also have coaches who are broad stroking communication in many different facets, but I want to nuance our communication today. So communication, when you talk about communication and how that is interlaced with masculinity in our society, you hear oftentimes that men, we don't communicate enough. We don't share feelings enough. We don't do this. We don't do that. What's your take on communication in the masculine space?
Well, thanks for asking. I'll just do a little bit of background on some of my learning. I was in a program for about 6 years. There's a lot of personal growth and development. One of the programs we took was called Communications, and you learn a lot inside of there. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is there's a place that we as humans come from when we're communicating, and I didn't know that I had a certain place, and I discovered in that course from where it is that I come from when I'm communicating.
Right. Okay.
That was one thing, right? So I said all that to say that I've studied and been very interested in the conversation just about communication. So when you asked me about talking about this, it was I knew it'd be a fun conversation. But what I want to say about it is, as I continued in my personal growth and development, I learned that for the most part, human beings don't realize that communication, its number one purpose is not just to talk to each other. and to express wants and desires. The number one purpose for communication is to create. So God gave us our mouth to co-create alongside him. Now, the bigger you can think and the more alongside him you can think, the different types of words that come out of your mouth, and that's what goes out and creates. So I've been really focused on the words that are popping out of my mouth for a long time. And, if we're talking about masculinity, clearly, if in general people aren't communicating for the sake of communicating, they're definitely not going into these nuances of life called masculinity, right? Not a lot of men are out there having a nuanced conversation and communicating intentionally about this thing called masculinity.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's very particular, because a lot of us, when we grew up, we don't have that conversation about masculinity, say for instance with our dads. We might have it with the boys later on sometime in life, but we haven't really sat down, hey, you know what, let me share with you about masculinity. What do you think about that? Found that to be true?
Totally, because if I look back on my history as I'm growing up, the people around me that I was influenced by, they were the ones impressing upon me what masculinity could look like, but it still wasn't a conversation. They didn't say, Stacy, I want to sit you down and talk to you about this thing called masculinity. Here's how you do it. It's just, right. I picked up on it or I didn't, and I got what I got from that person. And as I got older, I started to develop what I thought might look like that, or the things I did or did not like about this thing called masculinity.
So with that being said, what's your whole idea about it being toxic? That you hear a lot now on the internet, and people, mainly women, come from the portion of this whole toxic masculinity.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of versions of masculinity, and I think if you say the word masculinity, everyone's definition is going to come out differently, and it's going to be based on their experiences in life as to what they think it is or is not. So, of course, there is an element of toxicity in masculinity. There is, and it's because that man doesn't understand the definition of masculinity and doesn't know what masculine's purpose is and how to fully express masculinity. So as a result, toxicity pops out. So that is just one piece of the pie. There's so many pieces of the pie, and toxicity is one of them, and it does exist.
What I found about toxicity, though, is that it can show up in a myriad of different places, not just masculinity. It's toxic femininity, if you want to go that route too. There's other, as you were talking, there are other areas in our lives, toxic relationships, right? Those sorts of opportunities. Have you found that to be the case as well, or is it just mainly centered around masculinity?
Actually, the fact that we are talking about this, it points to that in general, this conversation is not happening, and it's all like, nothing's being really said about it until you go to a page like ours that's dedicated towards a masculinity and talking about masculinity, but it doesn't exist in the world. It's not a conversation people are having. And so, I think it's like, I think it's one of those things that's, I don't think people have enough language around it. They don't know what to say about it.
Sure.
And it's there though. I think I gave you an example yesterday when we were talking about this. And you as a man, you might be in some kind of a business meeting with somebody you haven't met before, another man, right? He walks in the room and he's going to be the age that he is and the height that he is and the size that he is, and his voice is going to be the way that it is, and he's going to be wearing the clothes that he is, and you're going to have some relationship to how masculine or not he is. And and profiling, I guess, is what somebody might do right there. And but you would never open up a conversation with that guy right there and start talking about masculinity.
Right. Yeah. Let's have a conversation about masculinity. No, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Like, sir, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how masculine would you say that you are? In a business meeting, you just wouldn't say that.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
But you are still having those thoughts though, and when I was growing up, I was very influenced by Rambo and Rocky and some other karate type movies or fight movies, or and athletes, people that I thought carried a lot of masculinity, and I thought, I want to be like that. And as I got older, I learned, okay, that's only one style of masculinity called physicality. That's just one piece of masculinity, right? But still, people are still not pointing to masculinity about that person. Even if a guy is super big and strong and athletic and got a big beard, they're pointing to what he's good at in life, which might be athletics, but they're not pointing to masculinity.
Sure. So that being said, what other components would you add as part of the addition for masculinity? We have physicality. What else would you add?
And I know people break this down in lots of different ways. When I say physical, I mean the physical body, and then which could also include our emotions or our soul, our mind, will, and emotions. But the way we think, the way we deal with things in life is what I'm calling emotions. And financial is a piece where people can exercise masculinity, and then in the spirit realm. So I think those are the four categories I usually refer to when I'm talking about us humans as a whole, and specifically in this conversation, masculinity for a man. Those four categories: physical, emotional, our finances, and our spirituality.
Care to add a little bit more context on each one of those for those who are listening?
Yeah, and just to point back real quick about what I was saying earlier, if I could encourage men in general just to get out and have more conversations about this thing called masculinity. What is it? What does it look like? What's healthy? What's toxic? Right? That's one thing I would love to see, and just in life, in groups. And I love that we're doing this for that reason, to get that conversation started. And then, but the other thing is about being a Christian. And I'll call you a follower of Christ, whatever religion you are. But as a Christian man, I've learned that there is a lot of levels of masculinity.
I like that.
There's a lot of masculinity, and unfortunately the church and the Bible, when it's taught a certain way, it's talked about in so much of like the word love gets brought up a lot, and people don't really have the full definition of love and what love really looks like. That gets taken out of context. Turning the other cheek, which is taken out of context. That verse is, they talk about meek, and meek doesn't mean weak.
Weak, yeah, that's what people associate with.
Yeah, they do. And so those are the typical things people will talk about. And then, when you see a Christian man, in general, I would say they're not exercising their masculinity. They're not, and at any level, because of these teachings that have been brought up in the church. And I think if they knew what the Bible really said about it, it would give them permission to be a full masculine, to express their full masculinity in all these areas.
Okay, elaborate a little bit more on that. I like that. I like where you're going with that.
So, I'll just pick one. The Bible talks about men being protectors, right, of our family, and so that is ingrained in us. Every single man on the planet, I believe, has this ingrained. They're hardwired to be a protector. But protecting just isn't protecting the burglar that comes in the door, that usually doesn't come to the door. Not a lot of people are getting burglarized by gunpoint. I know it happens, but in general, you don't experience that in your lifetime, right? It's not about just pulling up to the gas station and some guy trying to get at your wife or your kid while you're pumping gas. Yes, that can happen, but protect doesn't just mean that. It means protect at every level, right? And you're on guard for your family on every level. Right, you're paying attention to the information that comes in through the television. You're paying attention to the information that people are getting from the outside, and the influences that your family is getting, and who they're hanging out with, and what school they go to. And as a man, that's protecting, is putting your child and wife in positions to thrive. That's another level of protection, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I can go on and on. There is protecting your family financially, right? The way you spend your money for your family puts them in risk or non-risk, and how you handle money. There's a masculine Christian way to handle money such that you're protecting your family, right? But when it comes to the spiritual part of it, there is language. The word, the spoken word, and specifically the Bible, that is like a sword for us. That's our weapon. right? The average man is not going around and arming his family with the word of God. They're not doing that. Putting the word in their mouths and in their minds and saying, okay, here's how you speak to this exact scenario. Here's how you handle this. Here's the weapon in this scenario and how you would handle this. Right? And that's unfortunate because when we hear protect, we hear get into a physical fight. That's just one to me.
That's just one opportunity for it. Wow, that's pretty extensive. I think
And then
most people don't think about it that way.
right, and the other thing I wanted to say about the spiritual nature of it is that we have been given such a level of authority in the spiritual realm. So the idea is you take that spiritual authority and you exercise it in the natural.
Okay.
Right? It's an authority that I guarantee 8 out of 10 men do not know even exists. They're not exercising their supernatural authority in the natural realm. And
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so like I could give you the example of faith. Faith is something that has not happened yet. Okay, so let's say that I want something for my family, and let's say God has shown me a picture of something that he wants for me, but it's not here in my physical realm. Okay, the way I pull it from that supernatural realm to this physical realm right here is with my mouth, and I've got to pull it from here to here. But I have the authority to do that because of what he's given me, right? I have the authority to tell animals not to bite me. I have the authority to tell sickness to go away. I have the authority to have favor in all my business relationships. I have that authority. I exercise my authority. Not all the time, of course. I'm not perfect, but the fact that I learned I've been given this thing called authority, that's a whole nother level of masculinity that's available to me. It's on a supernatural level. I can bring it to the natural level, you know?
So it sounds like in order to exercise that authority, you have to be able to communicate properly.
Ooh, that is beautifully said right there. That is beautifully said right there. That's what a true host would do right there. Just to listen like that and then boom, pick that out. You're exactly right. Communication it's that spoken language that gets from the thing that I want into where I exist right now. And that's now women can do that too. Okay. Women can exercise their authority, but there are certain things that a man has authority over, and the ability to exercise masculinity inside of because of what God's done for him, right? That supernatural power gets into the physical body, and it's almost like you could call it a supernatural physical strength that we've been given, and our bodies are a little bit stronger than women's bodies, and I think everyone would agree with that. So we can be the Incredible Hulk in a lot of areas in our life, I
like that. Yes. Yeah. So that being said, when we have the proper communication, talk about results, right? I love talking about solutions, love talking about how to do things, but also the results. When we communicate properly and all the items and concepts and ideas you're talking about, what are some of the things that we can see that transpires in our natural life that we start exercising our authority and our masculinity and communicating properly?
That's a great question. I love that question because I can just give you a real world scenario.
Okay.
I had a landscaping company for about 13 years, and when I did contracts with people, I had to come up with the idea, propose it to them, they would agree to it, and then came the money portion. And the money portion, you say, here's what I need down, and if this happens, then I need you to pay more money. And when we get to this point in the job, if I need more money, I'm going to have to ask you. We're going to have to be prepared for that. When I get done and you're satisfied with what we've done, in no more than 2 days, you're going to pay me the balance, right?
Okay, right.
So, having masculinity in that scenario is me knowing that I have the authority in that scenario. I'm the contractor. I'm the one doing the work. I'm the one performing. So I've got to lay it out for the customer and let them know that I have the authority in this scenario right here. I'm creating the contract. I'm creating the language. You're agreeing to my language, right? And then when it comes to that time, I'm going to fulfill on that thing. If you say you don't have the money in 2 days, then my contract says, here's the next step for me to do. So I would naturally take that next step. right? That's
Right.
all inside of my rights, as a contractor. But the language is what creates that, right? The communication and me, how I'm being with the customer and what I'm getting them to agree to or not, right? That's just in the financial realm. But to begin with, I'm exercising that contractor authority, and I'm also using God's authority in the way that I speak to these people, right? I'm not demeaning them. I'm not in a higher level than them. I'm just taking my rightful position as the leader in this scenario because I'm leading them by the hand through the contract, and I'm putting landscaping in their yard and they're having to pay me for it. So I'm the one who's in charge. So they're not in charge, right?
Yeah.
So the way that I perform on the job and the way that I get paid has to do with, am I going to communicate in a way that lets them know how this works, right? And I've found out that when I've made agreements with people and I've got them to agree and I said it out loud, the thing that I have in my head, I said it out loud and they agree with me, things go so much smoother. You know,
Nice.
I can use the same example in my relationship with my wife, right? We're not always on the same page about something, right? And if it doesn't go a way that I liked, or maybe, you know, we got upset with each other about something, well, then I have to look and say, I'm the leader here, right? I'm responsible for how my household goes. So I need to go back there and look and see what did I not say?
Sure.
How could I have communicated better what my expectations were or what my hopes were in this case? And then how can I make an agreement with her in the future so we don't cross this same bridge again? But still, it's communicating. We got to talk about it.
Yeah. So as you're talking about that, sounds like there's a synergy between the authority and being the leader and having the proper communication. Packaging that all together can extend some sort of end result for us from a positive standpoint if communicated correctly. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I am saying that. That's a good way to put it. And I'm saying that when we have gaps or holes or something didn't go the way we planned, I consider that a lack of communication on my part, right? As the leader, I missed something. I missed an opportunity to put something in place that would have made the difference here.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned relationships because it's a very big staple in a successful relationship is how the two parties communicate. Let's say from a husband and wife standpoint, the communication is essential. Yay? Nay?
Absolutely. So much. Yeah. What's funny about this is that I would almost consider myself an over communicator. So I love the courses that I got into in the communication. My wife, she's a lot quieter of a person, and she tends to not communicate, right? Her way of communicating sometimes is not communicating. And so it's been challenging. And, you know, usually that's the reverse. It's usually the woman trying to get the man to talk and the woman trying to get the man to express how he feels and what's important. And he just doesn't have the language for it. And I've seen most men that I know can't get the words out, you know, and I don't know if it's because they've been taught that way or because they just don't feel comfortable doing it, or if they think that they'll be exposed if they do talk. I mean, I'm not sure, but I've had to learn with my wife that I can't force her to talk, but putting in with communication agreements help us communicate when we encounter something that's difficult. So I can say, babe, last time we got in this scenario, we said what we would do in this case is just start asking each other questions like, do you need some time right now to think instead of me pressuring you to talk? Do you want that time right now? That's something that we had to learn how to do, and I had to learn how to do it in the moment, which was very difficult, but that was the communication piece that I was able to add that such that we don't cross that bridge again.
Yeah. That's imperative, very imperative. Let me go back to something you said earlier. You mentioned mind, will, and emotions. I want to build on that a little bit. In our program, coaching program, we have a modality called the 5 parts of the authentic self, kind of like the soul you're talking about. So we have mind, will, imagination, emotions, and intellect. And we purport that communicating properly by having those 5 pillars intact is also a way to properly communicate. So you're talking about emotions. Talk to us about how masculinity with the communication with the emotions, and what does that look like, or what should it look like from a masculine standpoint, true masculinity?
That's an awesome question. That's so great. Man, I love that question. That's a question that doesn't get asked. You know what I mean? It's an excellent question. It really is, because, you know, every single day we have the opportunity to express our emotions in one way or the other. Emotions are happening all the time. And
absolutely.
You know, when I first got married, I tend to get really upset with my wife when she wouldn't talk to me. And what I realized that I was doing, when I really wanted to talk about something and get through something and push through something, and she didn't want to talk, I took it like she doesn't care enough about me, or she doesn't love me enough to have the conversation, and that made me mad on top of having my feelings hurt, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But the way that I responded, honestly, was really inappropriate to begin with, because I got mad and I got upset and I made things up, right? And I made
the imagination kicked in. I made things up. Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely. The things I made up was like, I guess I'm not worthy. I guess she doesn't love me enough to work on the relationship. You know, that's all stuff that I made up, and I was having a response to that. And it's the reason it's inappropriate is because after the dust settles and we talk about it again, and I told her what I just told you. I'm like, well, I take it like you don't love me enough to have the conversation and to make it right. She's like, that's not the thoughts that I'm having at all. So she's having her own thoughts. So I'm inappropriately responding to something that I made up, right? So having masculinity in a scenario like that is first thing, boom, that's got to come into our mind when something happens like that, when we have an opportunity to explode, anger, frustration, whatever. The first thought should be, chill out. Okay, gain clarity here. You know what I mean?
Perspective, right? Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
Yeah, it's like before I explode right here, before I get mad, before I say something I don't want to say and say something that I have to say I'm sorry for later, why don't I investigate a little bit as to what's going on here, and which may take a couple minutes, might take a couple seconds. It's gonna require me to set my emotions down, right? Because sometimes those emotions are not healthy. You know? Yes, I know God gave us emotions. We have a full range of emotions, and the expression of those emotions are important. There's also a unhealthy expression of those emotions, and that's when you're in the heat of the moment, and unfortunately, your brain starts to make things up that most of the time, 9 out of 10 times, is absolutely not the case. So, masculinity to me looks like the ability to remain calm in a heated situation.
Yeah. That's that leader stepping into it. Yeah, there you go. That's right. We teach that all the time. Yep. Continue on. I love where you keep going. I love where you're going with it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. There's, I think men, and I had to realize this at some point, but men do get their feelings hurt. You know what I mean? It looks like anger, though. It shows up as anger. And, you know, like if I'm looking at how my relationship was with my father, I still have a relationship with my dad, but in the beginning, when my parents divorced, I made up an abandonment thing that I had going on, right?
Right.
It wasn't exactly true because it wasn't all about me, and I realized that when I got older, but there's that abandonment thing. Now, sometimes when my wife and I get into an argument or a fight, the abandonment shows up, which really looks like fear that you're going to leave me. Okay, so in a real fight and in a real scenario, boom, sometimes that pops up right now, like boom, I don't care how much growth and development I've had, bam, fear of abandonment is right there for me, right there. It's enough to make you fearful and angry, right, all at the same time, right?
How you communicate, right?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And it's like, in the moment, I have a choice right there, right? And I have been so mature sometimes where I've thought in the moment, I'm like, babe, this probably isn't the right time to continue the conversation. I'm feeling heated up pretty good, and I'm probably just gonna say things that aren't in alignment with what we're up to right here. And why don't you give me an hour to let the dust settle and gather my thoughts here, and we'll come back and we'll talk about this, you know, and I've done that successfully a couple of times, not every time, but man, that worked so good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like what you're talking about right there, because we take those 5 pillars: mind, will, imagination, emotion, and intellect. We superimpose communication over the whole entire spectrum. I like when you say you got to calm yourself. You got to calm the mind. have to calm the mind, to get that clarity and perspective. Clarity from the other person, perspective of the other person, but also be self-aware of what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling at the moment. So you have to calm the mind in order to do that. Otherwise, all the other stuff that can deflect your level-headed thought. Then you got the will. You have to really push yourself, make sure you be resilient in that fact so you can get back to the proper way of communicating as a leader, as we should, with the other people that we're talking to in mind. Because if we don't do that, what it can do is affect the imagination, and the imagination can cause the emotions to flare up as well. But we have to make sure we get into that correct state of mind, so the intellect, the last one, to talk from, and to say communicate from an intellectual standpoint, rational, logical thought process, so that we can process this whole opportunity, whatever the opportunity was in our current environment, so that we can communicate properly like masculine men are supposed to communicate.
That's awesome. I love what you're saying. I think there's something else here that we're not talking about. What you're saying is absolutely brilliant, but to go back to what I was saying about abandonment, I had to actually take those courses, and I had to read, and I had to do the work on myself, and I had to take a deep dive, and I had to do some investigating on myself to see what really pops up in my real life for those things. And so that's another thing that I don't think men are doing. They're not educating themselves. They're not growing and developing. And the stuff that you have, the information that you have, came from legit studying and working on it, and putting yourself in front of all the work that you've done, right? I mean, how much money and how much time has been spent for you developing yourself to discover these things about yourself,
Yes.
And I want to encourage men so much right now to start the dive, start the deep dive, start the tearing apart, pull the onion apart, and look in there and see what's going on,
I love that. I love that what you say, because that's exactly why we're doing this, because a lot of us haven't taken the time to understand how to communicate. We know how to talk, but we don't know how to communicate. And just because you know how to talk is one of my favorite sayings. One of my quotes I have in our program. Just because you know how to talk doesn't mean you know how to communicate. Two vastly different things. And in fact, I say it like this: communication should be viewed as a strategy. And what do you do with strategy? Strategy is all 100% intentional. We're going to do this, do this, do this, do this. You're thinking about it. It's not that you're just flying out the handle from an emotional standpoint. But true masculinity is going to see communication as a strategy, very deliberate, very intentional, very direct in understanding my perspective, where I am, being self-aware, and also being others-aware. And now I can properly communicate with you. Right,
man, it's freaking awesome. I love what you're saying, because it takes me to something else, because it's like what you said right there is absolutely perfect. And the average man does not have a commitment level. They don't know where the conversation should even go. Right? So it's like I have a commitment with my wife. We said the vows out loud, and we spoke it in front of a bunch of people, and God, everyone heard the things that we said to one another about staying together. Okay, so you got to remember, that's a commitment of mine. No matter how hard it gets and how bad I want to back out, I can't go out. Why? The words have already popped out of my mouth. So when I'm dealing with something, I'm coming from a commitment level. I'm coming from, we're going to work this out. I'm coming from that we can't give up. That's my come from.
Yes.
And I'm working towards that inside of my what, as you said, communication. The communication that's coming out isn't me belittling her and telling her how she should be different and be more like me. The conversation that's coming out is like, hey, babe, what do you and I need to do and work together on such that we can stay inside of this commitment that we made to each other? And that's effective communication right there.
Yeah, that's effective communication. Love it, love it, love it. And communication, no matter how people think about it, what they know about it, what they don't know about it, communication needs to be taught. Us men, we need to learn, take courses or a coaching program, or mentor, somebody that understands how to communicate and pass that skill set along to other men that need it. Because because when we do that, we can have better relationships. We can get more in tune with our own health. We can get in tune with our own wealth, whether it's your career, your business. There's so many other areas that will affect in our life when we understand how to communicate properly from the leader perspective, being masculine and having that sincere, heartfelt care and love for other people that we're communicating with 100%. That has to be taught, though. It has to be taught. It's not innate.
Yeah, you're right. It's not. You're exactly right. And just probably one of the last things I want to say about this is that I told you that communication course that I took. I'm giving you an example of what I discovered about myself. The place that I come from when I'm communicating had to do with the fact that whoever I was talking to was probably going to be leaving soon because of the abandonment, right?
Right. Okay.
All of my communication, all of it came from that planet. The planet of how much longer is it going to be until you leave? It didn't matter if you were a friend or, somebody I was dating or whatever. But if I got really close to somebody, my fear was that they might be leaving. Right. So when I got into a big argument or a fight with somebody, it was like, just go ahead and leave. And I'd turn my back and I'd leave so I didn't have to deal with it. And I said, you're never going to see me again. I'm out of here. Right.
Wow.
But, I discovered that other people's come from is absolutely completely different. Nobody has the same one as I did. Sometimes it's like, oh, who cares? It doesn't make a difference anyway. That could be a place you come from. So no matter what you say, you're speaking from, oh, who cares? It doesn't make a difference anyway. Or it could be no one's listening. It could be no one cares. It could be I'm not worthy. It could be I'm not loved. Those are all the places that communication can come from that if you don't go discover that about yourself, you're not going to learn how to correct your communication. You know what I mean?
I do, and well stated there. And that's why communication is such an important skill for us men to embark upon, to leverage, to continue to position. So, folks, glad we had Stacy on here to share some information with us. And we will be having other classes, even those who are outside the local area will get online. We'll be talking about communication, how to effectively communicate so that you can have better relationships, better health, better wealth, but also lead from that perspective. So thank you very much. How can they find more information on you or if they want to chat with you?
You know what? I am on social media. HOFcowboy@gmail.com is my email address. And I'm on Facebook at Stacy Shepard, and HOF Cowboy again for Instagram. Those are the platforms I'm typically on. And one tiny little last thing I want to say before we end is thank you so much for having this conversation and letting me be a part of it. And what a lot of people may not know about you and me, they probably know this about you, but they don't know the nature of you and I's relationship is that you're my Sifu, you're my Kung Fu instructor, and we've been together for over 7 years now, just in that venture, right? And so what's so cool about this conversation didn't go the route of fighting. It didn't go the route of masculinity in the form of getting into a fight and imposing our physical will on somebody. It ended up in the relationship era, and that says a lot about just, the direction of the conversation and the purpose of communication and how masculinity can be really applied in other areas of our life. So I just thank you for taking the conversation that way, and thanks for the good questions.
Absolutely. And I want to give a heartfelt sincerity and thank you to you as well for being open to talk to us about your experience in communication with masculinity and how all that is pieced together. Thank you so much for all the information. Folks, you can find us online, Facebook. We're on that platform, Instagram, that's newly set up, as well as TikTok. Do follow us, share the video, like, subscribe, follow us, join the group, the Facebook group there, League of Prestigious Gentlemen. We have the LPG movement, so let's keep it LPG, folks. Until next time, we look forward to bringing you some more information like today. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Sifu.